For the first Sunday in December, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda today, Burl Ellis has his convictions overturned. There's a new police chief in Atlanta, and two Purdues are in the spotlight with the Trump administration. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this Sunday in December. We will turn to probably what's the most important story in just a minute. That's the case in Maine, of all places, about Georgia's water and Florida's water. But we want to start with very local news at the outset. And it's a story we've covered now for 2.5 years at least. And that's the former DeKalb chief executive, Burl Ellis. This past week, the Georgia Supreme Court unanimously overturned his convictions for perjury and attempted bribery, I guess would be the correct term. However, interestingly enough, Judge Harold Melton, in his unanimous decision, wrote, Jeff, that the preponderance of evidence indicated that Ellis was guilty of those two felony charges, but that the judge made mistakes.
That is actually a mischaracterization, I think, that was probably in the press and in the media. One of the bases for the appeal was whether or not there was sufficient evidence. And actually what the court said was that there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial, not some editorial statement on whether or not he should have been found guilty. This court, which rarely overturns the result of a jury, I mean less than 5%, particularly in criminal cases, unanimously overturned this one because of errors by the judge at trial.
Two.
At least two, and there were a lot. But they cited two, one being that the judge disallowed all testimony of vendors who didn't feel pressured and only allowed testimony of those who did. And another one was when a witness from the grand jury, they had 25, 26 grand jurors, they pulled one grand juror forward to give testimony, and they also reversed on those grounds. But the interesting thing about this case, and we've all talked about this for a long time, is that here you have a man, a husband and father, who went to prison for 8 months because Judge Courtney Johnson refused an appeal bond on the basis that his appeal was frivolous. And you have a unanimous Supreme Court that has found that not only were the bases not frivolous, but they were grounds for complete reversal.
Well, that's all fine. You can. I happen to think Judge Johnson is a very promising young Superior Court judge in DeKalb County, and she did a very good job with a very tough situation. The fact is, Burl Ellis remains charged. He is still a felon until a DA decides to drop the charges. Is that correct, Phil?
Well, you are correct. But I will side with Jeff on this one. I think that Judge Johnson made some errors and had her hand called on it. And as I think we've all agreed over the last year or so that the prosecution actually overstepped in several areas too. So you are right, but I think the bigger I think this is the bigger picture is that the mistakes were egregious.
But let's make the point we always make. I think we're all in agreement on this, which is a rare occasion, and that is that Burl Ellis was overcharged in a sense. He was never accused of stealing money from the public or lining his own pockets.
He was not.
He was charged with shaking down vendors for campaign contributions. And
there's a fine line there.
And if Burl Ellis gets 8 months in prison, how many years does Hillary Clinton get?
Let's not go there.
I had a very prominent person in the Georgia legislature say to me, if this is the standard, we'd all be in jail. I mean, this is what politicians do. They go to those people who benefit from them being in office and ask them for campaign contributions. A large part of running for office is phoning for dollars, calling for dollars.
So now, Burl Ellis,
Jeff, you're correct. However, you've got to be careful, and you're at the water. He was at the water's edge and may have dipped his toe in the water because you can't really threaten someone's business and bully them on the phone, and that was a big problem.
Well, I also go back to what I've said all along too, is the structure of the government in DeKalb put him in the position to have to call people directly as well as manage the bidding process. So that is part of what the problem was for him.
And unfortunately, the fervor to change that bastardized form of government is dimmed because everybody likes the incoming chief executive, Michael Thurman.
I'm gonna just tell you what, that he did not, was not granted an appeal bond and went to prison for 8 months and spent some of that time in solitary confinement among hardened criminals, only to have this conviction overturned when she could have granted an appeal bond, to me, is unconscionable.
All right, well, he gets now the chance to seek back pay and his pension if the county pension board votes accordingly, which I'm sure they will.
And well, the other thing I'd point out too is if he is tried again, that would be the third time that he would be tried for this, because the first trial
that's my
was a
next topic
mistrial.
here. I don't think the outgoing district attorney, Robert James, having been spanked by the voters in large part because of this case, I don't think he's going to bring charges in the next 20 days to retry Burl Ellis. And I don't think the new district attorney, Sherry Boston, there's nothing in this case for her. She's trying to start with a new clean slate. I can't imagine cheating.
It's his case. He tried it twice at great expense to the county in terms of money, but probably even greater in terms of reputation. It's on his plate now. He's lost this case twice. He needs to dismiss it while in the next 20 days, whatever time he has remaining in office. It's on his plate. He ought to dismiss it so that Sherry Boston really doesn't have to deal with it at all.
That nightmare scenario we joked about some time ago about all the names on the podium sign outside the DeKalb building. Burl Ellis will not be returning. If this had happened earlier, he might possibly have returned as CEO, pushing the interim CEO, Lee May, to the side.
Right.
And then we'd have the new CEO, Michael Thurman, waiting to take over in January. That circus has been avoided. Atlanta, a major change in the city of Atlanta. George Turner, who has been Kasim Reed's police chief, no question about it. The mayor appointed him. They're old, long family friends. And George Turner surprised people this week by retiring short of Kasim Reed leaving office in another year. And Phil, you've been an adversary of the chief. He does say, and I think correctly, that crimes are down in Atlanta. Murders are up, though.
Right.
Well, it's a mixed bag. I mean, is the glass half full or half empty? Murders are up. Break-ins are up. I think this, though, I think we ought to give the new chief a chance, Erica Shields. However, I remember just 2 years ago, right around this time, when I was downtown and I saw the mobs in the streets that were bashing police cars and going down Peachtree Street, and the police did nothing virtually. And then you saw it again when they tried to swarm the interstates. This is not the policing we want, and I hope the new chief, and I hope the mayor has even reconsidered this. We need to get tougher.
Exactly the policing we want. They did not go on the interstate. They prevented them from doing it, and they did it peacefully.
Did you see the damage to the police cars and taking over the streets? You can't let them take over the streets, and that's where I disagree with the
Well,
I got to tell you, you've got somebody who's been in law enforcement and in the Atlanta Police Department for 35 years, devoted that much of his time, his life, to this police department, to the safety of citizens in the city of Atlanta. My hat is off to him.
He's a guy who came out of Perry Homes.
Exactly right. My hat's off to him. I think that he's done a terrific job.
Absolutely.
I think that we need to salute these folks just like we do our veterans.
We got to get out. We ought to know about the new chief, Erica Shields, since we don't know that much about her. I thought Morse Diggs at Fox 5 had a pretty good line when her appointment was announced, and he said that she is receiving a one-year audition because clearly the new mayor at the start of 2018 will name his or her own police chief.
But again, you have another veteran in there. She's got a lot of time in the police department.
She's been running the department as operations chief.
Good. Thank you all, by the way. Not one of you mentioned, look, it's a woman police chief. Maybe we're beyond that. Who cares?
Well, because she's the second one. She's the second one
Well, I
behind
know,
Beverly
but
Harris.
she's qualified.
It's great.
No, she's a veteran. She's the kind of person that rises to the top. I just want to thank you all for not mentioning that.
It's not like Donald Trump's appointments. I mean, she's actually qualified to do what she
Here we go.
When we return, we will talk to you, of course, and I'll have to decide, do we talk about sanctuary campuses, water wars, or Purdue's? I'll be flipping a coin during the break.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
And as promised, we will begin with water wars. Really, it is the most important story that's been, if you'll pardon the pun, running underneath the surface of the news in Atlanta for the last several years. And as we've explained, the trial is being held in Lewiston, Maine, or Portland, Maine, I'm sorry, because the special master is from there. And Phil, you've been out ahead reporting on this, and we take a different view of this. My sense of the reporting this week is that Georgia might have a problem. You look at it differently. Governor Deal actually broke what apparently is a gag order, but talked about the plight of our South Georgia farmers and said they could be put out of business if this thing goes the wrong way.
Well, that's right. The trial ended this week. I think we had strong testimony. I think Florida is not making its case. The special master now goes with whatever his recommendations are going to be to the U.S. Supreme Court. And then the court could do several things. It could agree with whatever the special master says. It could partially agree. But the result could be monumental because Florida wants to cap our water. That's the essence of what's happening here. And you mentioned the farmers and Governor Deal speaking out. That would be calamitous to our agriculture
also, there's another
industry.
course, I think. Could not the Army Corps of Engineers resolve its water plan, have it approved by Congress, and we move on extrajudiciously without the court?
We've tried that.
And not only that, but that's a plan that calls for us to double our water consumption by 2040. And it's a plan that's been endorsed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and says that there is no harm to the Apalachicola Bay and the oyster industry there. I don't think that Florida proved its case, but that's not the point. The point is, if we don't settle this thing, Special Master's made it clear, you're both going to suffer. You're both going to lose. I'm talking about both states, Georgia and Florida. He is going to exact a punishment from
One
both
way or the
states
other.
if they don't get together
out.
and come to a settlement. He's made that very clear, and he did at the end of the trial.
Now, I want to get to politics, but there are a couple of topics we need to discuss rather briefly, I think. Number one would be Delta has resumed flights to Cuba. I can only excuse that because Castro's dead, but Delta was going to do it before he died.
Well, look at it. They're getting ready for the Trump Hotel in Havana.
Well, but I still
What
don't
do you
think we
think?
have any business dealing with a communist nation in the way we're doing it. I mean,
Well, we're getting
about this?
nothing in return. That's the point, and that's what Donald Trump has said. You know what? What are we getting in return? There's no freedom. Even the Democrats are admitting. I'm glad that the human rights violations are egregious.
they arrested
Yeah.
20,000 dissidents in the last year alone.
Well,
Cuba.
but the United States has been doing business with communist countries for years.
Well,
So
So what? I mean, this is. I think
wrongs
is a
don't
special.
make a right, my mama said.
Yeah, I think this is a special case.
And-
I mean,
and-
if
Well,
we're
but
gonna,
look
why grant them unilateral
well,
concessions?
because there are so many families that are connected between the United States and Cuba. It
You know,
makes
we know that this is ridiculous. It's a policy that hasn't worked. It's been in effect for 50 years. It's
Hasn't
done
worked?
absolutely no good. Yeah, the embargo on Cuba, no, it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked for the United States. It hasn't worked for the
brought
Cuban
millions
people.
of productive
It doesn't make any
Cuban
sense.
Americans
In the
to the
meantime,
United
we go over
States.
here, we do
Right.
billions and billions of trade with China. Is that not a communist nation?
Right.
Or
about it.
Trump's friend Putin
Wait
over
a
in
minute,
Russia?
you were in favor-
And so now he wants to reverse
You
what
were in
the
favor
progress
of
that we made with
you were
Cuba?
in favor of the embargo against South Africa. So you only like some embargoes and not
We're
others.
running out of time here.
That's
Yeah,
right.
Let me
absolutely.
Exactly.
let me also mention, I don't want to spend much time on this either, but the House had a task force, the State House, to look into the Judicial Qualifications Commission, and they said break it up into two parts. It's kind of technical, but the amendment did pass. The public liked it.
To
63%.
reconstitute it, to
yeah,
reconstitute.
and so we'll just notice that that's there.
Well,
unless you have to.
I think the people were right, number one, to reconstitute the JQC, and number two, this study committee, chaired by Wendell Willard, did a very good job exposing Lester Tate and some of these bar people that abused it.
Okay, now,
Well.
the big political story, of course, is that Donald Trump named Tom Price, my congressman and your congressman, to go to Washington to head the Department of Health and Human Services, the biggest bureaucracy probably known in the world, unless China's got a bigger one. And he is to root out Obamacare, suggested that he would do it over a 2 or 3 year period. And that sets off a scramble here in Georgia, especially North Fulton, Cobb, and Cherokee counties, and part of DeKalb, North DeKalb. We could name names of people who are looking
Cherokee's
at that
not
race.
a part of that district.
They cut it out
Yeah, Cherokee's not a part of the district.
and added the North DeKalb part of Brookhaven and Dunwoody.
That's right. Cobb is the slightly larger part of that district, and then you have North Fulton, and then, yes, you've got that North DeKalb. Just a footnote with Tom Price. We all know him. He has actually been the key lawmaker over the last 4 years that actually has a replacement plan for Obamacare, and it's to get the government out of the doctor-patient relationship. And I think that's something that even a lot of independents and Democrats are going to want.
And wouldn't it be lovely to get the insurance companies out of the doctor relationship?
Well, that's part of it too. That if you read the Tom Price plan, he has actually had this for 3 or 4 years, and now finally he's getting a chance under the Trump administration.
And let's go back even further. Tom Price, when he was in the Georgia General Assembly, he is an orthopedic surgeon, and he was outlining a plan that he's now going to get a chance to implement in the halls of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, he does. But he's also going to be implementing a plan on Medicare. And there are a lot of folks out there, seniors out there, who don't want that plan essentially voucherized. I think that's what they're talking about doing with Medicare. Dick has his hand up. And that is going to cause a tremendous amount of consternation because, you know, when you start talking about Medicare and senior citizens, it goes well beyond partisanship.
All right, we got to get out.
That's right.
Which brings us to a natural break point. We won't have to mention the long list of successors. We can do that after we take a break. We've got that. We've got the Purdue's, 2 of them, in the spotlight at Trump Tower. And we've got just Trump. He's everywhere. Stay with us.
Mercy.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Just a personal note on that Tom Price matter of going to Washington to the Department of Health and Human Services. He's part of what is kind of encouraging about the Trump administration. The appointments so far seem to be people with professional expertise. Tom Price is the epitome of that in terms of his credentials to attempt to reshape or replace Obamacare. So what happens to the 6th District of Georgia with Tom Price going to Washington? There'll be a special election probably February or March that doesn't take place until he's confirmed, so he doesn't have to resign. The first one in is Judson Hill, a state senator from Cobb and Fulton County. He has announced. Other names are all speculation. Rusty Paul, the mayor of Sandy Springs, Brandon Beach, a state senator, Karen Handel, who is familiar to Georgia voters from a Senate race and a governor's race. Jan Jones, the Speaker Pro Tem of the Georgia House, a very powerful and accomplished lawmaker. Dan Moody, a former state senator. John Albers, a state senator. Chuck Martin, a state legislator. Come on, Phil. We can keep going.
A lot of folks can keep going.
We could keep going. I think we would all agree this is going to be one of the most expensive congressional races in modern Georgia history. I think some of these people are going to be getting out, and I know we all want to speculate a little bit, but
I just don't want to omit anyone, you know?
Well, there's going to be more, too, probably, and some of these will be dropping out. But I think that actually, North DeKalb could be key. You could get another candidate in Cobb County, maybe like a Representative Sam Teasley, because Cobb County likes to have one of its own, as we all know.
That was my point a minute ago. I didn't elaborate, but traditionally that is a Cobb seat. Tom Price broke the mold.
He did.
By defeating Robert Lamont in a runoff.
Right.
And showing that the votes, the raw votes, are in North Fulton. They're in the new cities of Milton, Alpharetta, and Johns Creek.
However, as you just listed, North Fulton will be all split up between these various people that have various groups of supporters in North Fulton. So I would advise a North Fulton candidate, you better make nice with North DeKalb if you want to overcome some of the Cobb votes.
You know, a lot of people were in that race, but I was at a press club event earlier this week, and somebody suggested the name Phil Kent. To run in that race, and it wouldn't be unprecedented, of course, for Georgia Gang panelists to run for Congress.
Not going to do it. Not going to do it.
No.
Thanks, Jeff.
The great mentioner. That was very nice of Jeff to do that. Bruce LaBelle, who lives in Dunwoody, for example.
Yes.
He's a black fella, and he ran Donald Trump's National Diversity Coalition. Donald Trump.
I thought you said Trump. I'm sorry, but either one is fine.
Donald Trump. You know, Bruce LaBelle's a guy that could run. Who knows?
Who knows?
It's a free-for-all.
It is.
He would be running from the DeKalb portion of the district.
And there's an interesting footnote from what I hear in Washington. Donald Trump wants to get this done quickly. He wants to get Tom Price and some of these other cabinet members confirmed before Inauguration Day.
Or on the day of.
Well, before. I'm
now,
hearing
in the middle of all this,
I don't think you can do that legally.
Everybody talked about David Perdue as a potential pick for Commerce Secretary, Georgia's junior senator, David Perdue.
That's already done.
And we mentioned him, we talked about him, the national press talked about him, and out of nowhere comes Sonny Perdue, his cousin, the former governor.
Agriculture.
Who goes to Trump Tower, and a little details I love.
With
he
his
was wearing a
tractor
tie
tie.
with tractors on it. That's pretty cool. And he met with Trump to be Ag Secretary. Fascinating. He's certainly qualified for that, given his varied agricultural and business interests in Middle Georgia. Bill Shipp, our former colleague, would be having a hissy
attack,
fit over
yeah.
that, you know.
I think it'd be great for Georgia, obviously.
But you could have, is it possible you could have both Sonny Perdue and David Perdue?
I doubt it.
I don't think so. You probably have one or the other. At this point, Sonny
I think
seems more likely.
David Perdue is at Trump Tower as we tape this
but
broadcast.
I think that Sonny is probably more likely. The problem is that, you know, we were just talking about this water wars thing. You could have a Georgian as agriculture secretary, and you know, Georgia farmers really badly hurt by the whatever the ruling is going to be, or the recommendation to the Supreme Court is going to be on the water wars case.
Right, and Sonny Perdue was notoriously missing in action on the water wars front. He didn't care about it.
Well, he got us through that drought.
Okay.
He did get us through that bad drought, the one that required prayer. You
Wait a minute,
remember
that
one?
prayer got us through the drought.
Well, he's the one that
Yeah,
he's the
right.
one that led the prayer,
Right,
true.
that's exactly.
and it worked. I think, that's my memory, because it always does rain again. So you know, even the Indians knew that. All right. When we come back, we will touch on the economy, lots of politics. We'll talk about carrier air conditioning, and whatever else we have room for. So you come back with us.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Before we turn to Donald Trump and more of his activities, I mentioned Emory University, and I think that's worth discussion. The new president of Emory, Dr. Claire Stirk, sent out one of those hysterical letters to her snowflake liberal students at the campus, saying that we'll all get through this with Donald Trump being president, and then promising that she would, I don't think it was her term, but that they would make Emory sort of a sanctuary campus for dreamers, the children of illegal immigrants born here in the United States.
Right, whose deportation has been temporarily deferred until
Right.
January 20th. But what's going to happen? What's going to happen though? Let's talk about Emory. What's going to happen? This is an undermining the rule of law, and it's a disgrace. You know,
And,
it used to be.
Agnes Scott College joined as well.
And beyond that,
Well, they haven't
bet you
decided yet. They haven't decided yet because the other shoe just dropped this past week, and that's Representative Earl Earhart of the State House of Representatives, and he's got tremendous support. If these colleges try to undermine the rule of law, they're going to lose out on their taxpayer money, grants, and everything else. And
They
I think
lose Hope scholarships for their kids.
I think it's an effective shot across the bow, and I hope Emory, common sense.
I hope Emory stands up to him. Emory probably has more money than the state of Georgia.
So you're for violating the law.
I am for making sure that the $100,000 investment that we've got in illegal immigrant children who are here by no right of their own, right, have the opportunity to go to college.
So federal.
You've already,
So the feds
Bill
can't touch
Kent,
anybody.
have already invested $100,000 into these kids' education, and you want to turn them away from a college education
You know what,
and make them
I'll make you a deal.
unproductive,
I'll make you a deal.
uncontributing citizens
Jeff,
of the
I'll
United
make you a deal.
States.
What?
Makes no
We'll
sense.
educate all those kids, all the ones you talked about. We'll educate the child of every illegal immigrant anywhere in the United States if we do the right thing and do away with birthright citizenship for children born here of illegal parents.
Well, you can
Well,
cut
that's
your
not
deals
gonna
with
happen.
Jeff, but I think
That's
the
not gonna
rule of
happen.
law is paramount.
So-
I'm sorry that liberals now are just trying to do selective laws that they
Civil
like.
disobedience is part of the American way to protest laws that are
You can
immoral
protest
or
all you can
unethical.
protest all you want. You
So
can
there you go.
You can elect people. You know,
But when
elections
you
have
protest-
consequences too.
Yes,
When
you
you
do.
protest,
and I'll bet
you
you
get
anything
arrested.
that Donald Trump is not going to send those kids home. He's going to prioritize. He's already hinted that he's going to prioritize his deportation plan, and they
Well,
are not going to be on the
that's
top
true.
of the list.
Prioritize
But I don't
deportation
think- but
plan,
Donald
just
Trump is
like
also-
Just like
President
Obama,
Obama did.
exactly.
But he has
I-
also signaled that he's not going to tolerate sanctuary
Well,
cities.
that's the bottom line, and neither is the new Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
That's right. So I think this is a very open question. And I'm just so disappointed to see Emory and Agnes Scott flirt with this sort of thing.
Well,
I'm
it's
I understand
it's
if
shameful.
Yeah.
they've got some dreamer kids there. Yeah, I understand they want to keep them there. I get all that. It's a compassion point. but just do it. Why do you have to make it?
And to Alexis's point, you've already heard Senator Sessions, who's going to be Attorney General, I believe, already say the immigration courts are going to be more fully staffed. You're going to have more immigration judges, and you're going to have more deportations.
Look, it started.
Already,
this
President
Trump,
Obama
this
has
Trump
a record
movement
for deportations.
began with the word immigration.
It has.
That was the signature
and
part of his campaign.
Jobs was right there
That's
with
what
it.
launched
Right.
it.
He said he invented
Why
it.
these universities would want to wave a red flag in front of that after the American people spoke, I have no idea. Well, I do know the answer. They're all communists, they're all liberals, they're all bedwetters, and they're poisoning young minds. When we come back,
Please,
we'll
that's
some
so
listeners.
wrong.
What are you trying to say?
Tell us what you really think.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.